Steve is here to tell us about WordPress security. So Steve has been doing WordPress sites for more than 10 years, and after experiencing a hack site, anybody in here had a hack site before? A couple people? Okay. Well, Steve went a different direction with it. He became obsessed with security, and so he works as a certified ethical hacker and as a security certified professional, the OSCP through Kali Linux. He's going to work us through all the different facets of WordPress security, plugins, and all the different types of things that are going on there. So please welcome Steve.
Thank you all for coming. I'm a little out of my element because I was told I have to stand in front of the podium. And those of you who know me know that I can't stand still. So I'm usually kind of all over the place, but I'll do what I can to make sure that that the recording can hear. But as he said, I'm Steve. Been in the WordPress community developing sites for at least 10 years. And like he said, had a hack site about 6 years ago and decided to get smart about security. I actually got smart about security and got hacked again and realized how much I didn't know. And that's when I really, truly got serious about security. So I'm going to dive right on in. How many in here are using WordPress for themselves? Okay, and how many in here are developing WordPress sites for other people? Okay, so good, about 50-50. Okay, so good. I just want to get to know my audience. And you already asked this question. Let me see by a show of hands. How many of you have been hacked? That is a small number. That looked like about a quarter of you, which is actually kind of surprising. So,
If you don't want to admit it.
So to those of you who have not experienced a hack, thank you for coming, because talking about security is a lot like going to an insurance seminar. People don't really know that they need security until they truly, truly need security. So a lot of people in this room, I appreciate you being here. And to those of you who have been hacked, let's see what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen again. So I'm going to hit you with a 3-step approach. A lot of what I'm going to tell you, you're going to be like, duh, common sense, right? But I put common sense, or I put not so in quotes because not that many people are doing it. So I think it's worth talking about. Security presentations at WordCamps always revolve around plugins. I'm going to talk about plugins for like 5 minutes because that's been done. And we'll do a quick nod to the plugins, but I really want to hit you with some things that are a little outside the box of plugins. And then for those of you who are pretty technical at the end, I'll hit you with some advanced stuff. So I'm going to do a little bit of story time for y'all. And for those of you in the room who are old enough, and who knows Dragnet? Oh, okay. All right. So the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So story number 1. I want to introduce you to Mary. This is Mary right here. Mary is a recent college graduate. She got her degree in marketing. And she got a job at a small dental office in a relatively small town. Now, Mary is a good employee. She's very smart, solid, dedicated, everything. I mean, it's everything you could possibly hope for in an employee. And she's responsible for all the marketing components of this particular dentist office, writing blog articles and everything like that. So Mary writes 2 blog articles a week. She writes one on Tuesday and one on Friday. Well, on one particular Friday afternoon, she cut out a little bit early, and she ended up at Starbucks. She was waiting for a couple friends to show up, and she thinks to herself, "Oh man, I forgot to kick my blog article out." So there was a Wi-Fi called Starbucks. She tried to log into the Wi-Fi called Starbucks, and she couldn't get in. So she noticed, "Wow, there's another one called Starbucks One. I'll just go ahead and use that one," and she did. And she connected to this. Who knows what this is? 1. Okay, 2 of you. It's a Wi-Fi pineapple. It looks like a wireless router, smells like a wireless router, and it acts like a wireless router, except it also acts as a man-in-the-middle attack, so that any unencrypted information that you're passing on the internet is going to be visible in clear text via the Wi-Fi pineapple. It actually does a lot worse, more sophisticated hacks than that, but we'll just leave it at that. So unbeknownst to Mary, this guy was also in Starbucks that day. Mary had her coffee with her friends and didn't think much of it. This is Mary 3 months later. She looks like a completely different person, doesn't she? Mary had a hard 3 months. Let's take a look at what happened. The hacker sold the information on the dark web to somebody who purchased it and took this treasure trove of information and started stealing people's identities. And if we think about what a dentist office has, they've got our personal information, they've got our medical history, we've got our social security information, and I know the next one is going to make some of you really squirm because it's totally against everything that you've learned. They also had Visa and MasterCard information right there in the WordPress database, okay? So, the person who bought this information on the dark web had a treasure trove of information on all of these people that, go to this dentist office. And let's take a look at what happened. Well, first of all, let's look at what happened to Mary. Well, actually, okay, so Mary gets canned, right? She's done. As for the dentist office, once word got out that the dentist office was the ones responsible for all of these identities being stolen, yeah, they had an angry mob after them. And there was a class action lawsuit, okay? So let's look at what the hacker saw. Who knows what this is? This Wireshark, right. So Wireshark is a packet sniffer. And when you are on the internet, you're sending ones and zeros across the internet. And those ones and zeros, that's down all the way down to binary. But these ones and zeros can also be extrapolated if they are not encrypted. So when Mary logged in that day, I'm going to show you exactly what the hacker saw. I'm going to show you an example of what the hacker saw. These are just all the packets and everything like that. And if we click on one of the packets or if we filter, we can go down and we can follow the TCP stream and we can look, and as you can see my example, clear as day, the username and the password. That is because Mary was not using SSL and she was logging into an HTTP site. Had she had an HTTPS site with a secure socket layer, this is what the hacker would have seen. Okay? A little bit different. So that one measure is the difference between all that nonsense going wrong and nothing happening from it at all. So the simple fix is, and this is a big thing that happened in July 1st of last year with Google basically saying thou shalt have HTTPS. Okay? So that happened. So you can force HTTPS via the wp-config file. And if you're worried about writing all this stuff down, don't worry about writing it down. I'll have it available on my website, and I'll provide you a link to that so that you can. I'd rather have you guys pay attention than try to keep up with me writing all this kind of nonsense down. But this is the fix for that, okay? Another story. A good guy by the name of Thrifty Theo. Now, Theo works for a mid-sized company, and Theo prides himself on getting the absolute best possible deal on everything that he procures for the company. So, you won't be surprised when the company decided to put Theo in charge of buying hosting for the company, which one Theo decided to go for. Which one do you think he went for? There it is. All right. Good job, Theo. Well, Theo bought shared hosting on a shared server. And I want to show you a little something about shared servers. On a shared server, if you FTP in on port 21 using just simple FTP, which is unencrypted, which is exactly what we just talked about not doing, you're going to see the following. For those of you who know the WordPress structure, which I'm sure most of you do, you see all of the normal common WordPress files. So you log in on port 21 and you're at essentially the root level. But let's get cute and let's log in a different way. Let's log in using SFTP or SSH on port 22, which is the encrypted port. And we'll see if we see anything different. Right away, you see that 28 and you see that 729. Well, I recognize that 729 because that's my account number with this particular company. And the 28 kind of makes me a little bit nervous. I'm wondering what that 28 is. If we go into the root, you can see all the normal root files and everything like that. But what if we decide to get cute and go up a level. Now, what am I looking at now? Am I looking at all of the account numbers of all the other people on this server? Yeah. Pretty surprising. Well, what if I decide to get a little bit more nosy? Oh, wait, are these all of the servers with all of the accounts of all of the individual people on the servers? Right here on the shared server. And the answer is yes. There's every single one of them. You can move laterally on a shared server, on this particular company's shared server, rather easily. So I'm going to go back to mine. I know I'm on server 28, and I know my account is that 729 number or whatever it is. And obviously, I can click on my folder, and I can get into my account, obviously. But what if I get cute and decide to click on somebody else's account? Can I get in? And the answer is no, thank goodness. But what if I decide to, for example, use a custom command, or a directory command rather, called directory info? Well, I get a whole bunch of information here. Well, my account on this server is SRS5150. Certainly I can't do a control F on this document and find SRS5150 because that would be giving a hacker 50% of my login credentials. So I'm sure I'm not going to find that. Oh, there it is. But not only is my account name there, my SRS5150, you can log in using that. You can also log in using my account number. So now I've got I've got basically usernames and account numbers of every single person on this server. I'm 50% of the way there. Now all I need to do is just brute force any of these. And for those of you who don't know, hackers don't sit and type in SRS5150 and then type in admin. They use scripts like this that can guess millions of passwords per hour. On a simple laptop, you can do 1 million per hour. So if you can imagine a hacker who pools dozens and dozens of servers together and uses all the resources of those dozens of servers and tries to do a brute force attack, that number goes up exponentially. So what's the lesson here? The lesson here is do not, under any circumstances, with any provider, use their shared server for either your site or your company's site. $2.99 a month is great for a cat blog. It's not good for your business or your client's business, okay? So what are the options? Well, for WordPress, there's Manage WP. Okay, basically this is a significant step up from shared hosting. You guys know that if you're on certain shared hosting with certain companies, you're sharing an IP address. The highest number I've ever seen is 450,000 other people. So if somebody other than you gets that IP blacklisted, your Google rankings are going to go down, and it's going to take a little while for you to figure out why. Okay, so with managed WordPress, you're going to get your own SSL certificate and always make sure that you get your own unique IP address as well. So definitely step up to managed. If you're managing sites for other people, like me personally, I've got a VPS, and I've got dozens and dozens of clients on the VPS. And essentially what the VPS does is gives me more freedom than what I would get with managed WP. I know Linux fairly well. I can get into Linux. I can use the command line and stuff like that. So if you want a certain level of flexibility, a VPS is the way to go. And if you're a guru and you know how to basically stand up a server from scratch, there's another option which is dedicated, which allows you to do just about anything you want to. All right, one more story for you. You guys handle one more story? This one's my favorite. This story is about Gullible Gary. Now, Gullible Gary, I call him Gullible Gary, but he's a lot like Mary in that he's a smart, well-together kid who has great intentions. He's a good employee and everything like that. This is the bank that Gary works for, and that's Gary's cube right there. So on one particular Friday afternoon, Gary's getting ready to cut out to go drink some beers with some buddies. The phone rings. And on the other end of the line is a guy by the name of Tom. And Tom says, hey, Gary, hey, listen, we're making updates to the server over the weekend, and everybody's internet is going to be faster next week. But for whatever reason, we don't have the information on your cube. Can you do me a favor and just provide that for me? I just need to get one piece of information out of you. And Gary's like, well, yeah, I want faster internet. So Tom says to Gary, yeah, do me a favor, go to whatsmyip.org and tell me what it says. So Gary, wanting faster internet, dutifully does exactly what Tom tells him to do and gives him his IP address. Now, having an IP address for a large organization is not necessarily the keys to the castle, but it definitely shows you where one of the doors is. And with an IP address, you can start pounding on this IP, hit different ports, and look for vulnerabilities on ports. And if you find a vulnerability, you're in. Okay? So Tom's having such a good time with Gary, being so friendly and everything like that. Tom says to Gary, hey, Gary, can we do something else? Can we benchmark how fast your computer's going to get from this week to next week? And Gary's like, yeah, let's do that. So the guy on the phone says, do me a favor, go to howfastisyourcomputer.com. And he does. And the guy says, do me a favor, you see that button that says click to view? Click it. And he does. And he says, you see that button that says run? Do me a favor, click that button. And he does. And Gary sees this. And he's like, okay. Oh, right. Oh, okay, good. I think that was around 73 megapixels or megabytes or whatever, 73, whatever that number is. And Tom says to Gary, great, we're going to have you at 500 by next week. And Gary's just like, all right. They hang up. Gary never thinks anything else of it. Who knows what a rat is? Same two people, okay? A rat is a remote access Trojan. If I, for example, put a rat on your computer, I have all the access to all the files and all the things that you can do on your computer. When Gary hit the run button, it executed a script that sent code back to Gary's computer that put a rat on his computer. So now Tom can hear what's going on around Gary's cube through the microphone. He can turn the camera on if he wants to. He can access all of Tom's files, and he can access any file that Tom has access to on the network. It's just like being in Tom's workstation, okay? Right? So as developers, especially developers who are creating sites for other people, I think we have a responsibility to educate our clients, okay? Because we don't want to do this. You know, who's going to get blamed? I mean, I don't know about your situation, but in the one or two instances that I've had where I've had, hacks, I'm the first one to get the call, and I'm the first one to get the blame. So I want to nip that in the bud right away, okay? So this example that I gave you with Tom and Gary is essentially social engineering. And what social engineering is it's hacking the people and not the tech. You know, Tom probably would not have been able to get into that organization's system without Gary's help. But Tom tricked Gary into giving him the keys to the castle. The number one way that this is done is we all know about phishing emails, right? All these emails that people are sending millions a day that are trying to get us to click on stuff that will either A, send us to a website with malicious code, or B, get us right then and there with a rat. Phone calls, just like the example I just gave, a little less often occurring than the phishing emails, but because phishing emails are becoming so prevalent, the phone calls are picking up. Hackers are getting more and more astute with the way they want to trick you into getting information about you and the corporation that you work for. And believe it or not, in person. I know we see it in the movies a lot, but that whole thing of somebody dressing up, getting a job with the maid company to be at the office at night to put little thumb drives in computers and steal information, that does happen. It's, we're starting to get kind of on a government and a corporate espionage level, but it does happen. And then there are other ways that you might not think about. Like, for example, who's been in WordPress for more than 4 years? Okay, you guys remember the unbelievable prevalence of free themes several years ago? Well, what if you went to one of those free websites and you got one of those free themes and you incorporated the theme and you're like, yeah, this looks good. But what you don't realize is that theme has got about 1 million links to porn sites and sunglasses sites and other nefarious, places on the web. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get duped by these hackers. I like her so much I put her in there twice. All right, so when we talk about security, and in the WordPress community, you guys are just drilled. Make sure your core is updated. Make sure your plugins are updated. Make sure your theme is updated, right? Well, that's the application level. That's this red level right here. There's so many things that we need to lock down before we even discuss the application level. So let's hit them one by one. Number one, your clients or you're going to work from home. It's inevitable you're going to work from home. So let's lock down the box that you're working on at home or at Starbucks. Let's make sure that there's decent malware and antivirus software on that machine. And I'm not talking McAfee and Norton. I'm talking, use a good one. When the data leaves your computer, it's going to hit a router. Now, the router is kind of funny because I ask people all the time, hey, do you know the password to your router? And they're like, yeah, why? Do you need to get on the Wi-Fi? No, not your Wi-Fi password, your router password. And they're like, huh? Well, there's a statistic that over 70% of all of the routers in people's houses are over 5 years old. If you have a router in your house that's over 5 years old, chances are the username is admin and the password is password. Okay, so think about that for a second. Once you get into the router, you can get into the network. Okay, so let's educate our people to lock down their computers, lock down their routers, and the pipeline. Obviously, we need our data to go from our router to a server someplace. Let's lock down the pipeline. VPSs, or VPNs rather, virtual private networks. I just saw a commercial for a company doing virtual private networks. I think this is going to become commonplace for our travel on the web. Basically, this acts as a tunnel to encrypt your data from your machine to the server that it hits. It's a great way, it's probably the best way right now to basically encrypt all that data, okay? So VPNs. Once it hits that server, we already talked about this. Let's be wise in terms of the servers that we're putting our clients and our own data on. And not until now are we getting to the application level where we're actually talking about WordPress. And yeah, of course, lock down your core, update all your stuff, make sure your WordPress core, your plugins and your themes and all that stuff are updated. It goes without saying. And we get drilled into us this fact of making sure all the software is updated, but what sometimes doesn't get mentioned is the fact that there's server software that needs to get updated as well. If you're on a shared server, there is a chance that that company might be running PHP that's 3-4 versions old. And trust me, there are vulnerabilities in all of those old versions of PHP. Same with MySQL, okay? So lock down the server software. And this is something you have to generally call them and say, hey, ask them, you can figure it out on your own what levels you have, but it's just simpler to give them a call because chances are they're going to need to do it for you. Okay, I'm going to do a nod to the plugins. I love WordFence, and one of the things that I love most about WordFence is its brute force capabilities. If you remember earlier, I was showing you it hammering 1 million usernames and passwords per hour. Well, you can nip that in the bud by incorporating WordFence, which basically says, hey, if you try 5 logins or 2 or whatever, for whatever period, if you try 3, 4, 5, whatever, it will lock you out for a time period specified by you. For me, it's a month. If you're trying to hack the site, I'm not going to let you back in 2 hours. There's just no reason for that. So WordFence does a whole bunch of other things in addition to that, but that's one of the things that I like about WordFence the most. And of course, there's other plugins that do things like hiding certain directories and changing permissions on files and folders and stuff like that. But I'm not an advocate of having 5 or 6 or even 3 or 4 security plugins all at once on your sites, because come the day when one of those plugins throws an error and messes everything else up on your site, it's going to be hard for you to determine where the error came from in the first place if you've got all these heavy plugins. And the other thing is a backup plugin. And when I say a backup plugin, don't back your stuff up on the exact same server that your site is sitting on. Back it up to AWS or Backup Buddy, for example, uses something called, I forget what it's called, but they have their own. iThemes has their own. That slips my mind what it is. But make sure you're not backing your stuff up to the exact same server that your WordPress site is sitting on. Okay? That backup is going to contain your WP config file, which is going to contain all your database information. So you don't want that just easily retrievable. So getting a little bit beyond some of just the normal things is locking down these files, the htaccess file, the WP config file. Okay? One of the things that you can do that's fairly easy is in your WP config file, there's something called secret keys. And upon delivery of WordPress core, there's no information there. But what you can do is you can salt these keys. And that basically improves the encryption information. Now, one thing that you don't want to do is if you've got a client that's got a lot of different people on the server, you don't want to do this in the middle of the day because it will actually bounce everybody out and force them to log back in. So this is something that you probably want to do at night when there's not a lot of users on the system. And right there in the WP config is the URL for where to get all this gobbledygook. Okay? htaccess is on an Apache server is the first file that anybody hits long before they hit index.php or any of your other files. So it makes it a great place to create a bunch of server-side rules that determine what a user can and cannot do. And you can say right there in the htaccess, thou shalt not look at my htaccess or access my htaccess, or my readme, or my install, or my WP config. Okay? So you're basically locking things down before they even get access to the WordPress files. Here's one that I've been doing for years and years and years. Assuming you're not on a shared server, you can take your WP config file and you can move it one file above root. So if somebody hacks the server and they get access to your root folder, your WP config is actually sitting one level above that. And if you remember, your WP config has your database credentials. Once they get in the database, it's game over. It's just, you're done. So do everything that you can to make sure that they don't get access to your WP config file. File permissions. This is stuff that a lot of security plugins do. These are the guidelines for security plugins, 755 for folders and 644 for files. Some files like your htaccess, your WP config, you can take down lower. Now talking about what these numbers mean is a little out of scope in terms of what I'm trying to get to you today, but if you Google file permissions, you can get a pretty good idea rather quickly as to what these numbers mean and how far you can take them down. And a CDN, I was in a session earlier today where we talked a lot about CDNs. A content delivery network essentially acts as it caches a bunch of stuff on your site, most notably the images and some of the code, and it serves it up in multiple locations. So a person who tries to hit your site from California might end up on the San Diego server, whereas somebody on the East Coast might hit an Atlanta server. It adds another layer of protection to your site. It adds DDoS protection to your site. And with, for example, Cloudflare, if you spend money with them, you actually get a WAF, which is a web application firewall. So, these are things where you actually go into your name servers and you change your IP address, not to your server, but to the CDN. So it's the first thing to get hit. So the CDN helps tremendously with speed, but it also is an added level of protection for your site. And it serves your site up faster, which is great for search. Who remembers the wild, wacky days of everybody having there were 6 million forms available for WordPress? You guys remember that? Who picks their forms plugins just willy-nilly without doing a whole lot of research? Nobody. But once upon a time, there were forms that were designed that were very, very poorly coded. And you could go to one of these forms and you could type this in, 0 or 1 equals 1. Well, what the form is looking for is it's looking for a true-false value, with 0 being false and 1 being true. Well, when is 1 equal 1? Always. So with a poorly coded form, you could do a SQL injection and you could get into the information rather easily and you get straight into the database. And then there's just one more, which is cross-site scripting, where if you have a poorly coded site, code could be implemented onto the site so that anybody and everybody who hits that site might pick up some sort of malware. And it's essentially, you're not attacking the person directly, but you're putting the code on this particular site, and anybody and everybody who hits that site can be subject to your malware. And that's what I had. 30 minutes. That's it. So questions? What's that? Questions. Oh, yeah. Questions? Yes.
A really easy question. What's a good antivirus software not anti-antivirus?
Asking that, okay, she asked the question, what's a good antivirus software? Ask that to 100 people, you get 100 answers. I like AVG and I like Komodo. I don't, if anybody else have one that they love, feel free to shout it out. Say syllabus? Say it again? S-O. Okay. 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 Thank you for that. Who else? Yes.
So, I'm more of a graphics and advertising person. When it comes to computers, I'm about there's computer literate than there's me.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get to being able to set all these things up? Are there tutorials, are there to-dos, things I can find, or at mercy of?
The question was how. The question was, how do I do all this stuff if I'm not, extremely technical and know how to do this stuff? And the answer to that question, what I just gave you was 10 years or 6 or 7 years of research and everything like that for me to be able to attain all this stuff. So there's no easy, quick fix. I think the best thing would be to go with managed care on a managed site. And you could hire a security professional in your area that could basically go over this stuff, or you can have somebody pen test your site. And just pen testing the site will open your eyes to some vulnerabilities that you may not realize that you have.
Okay, so like, for example, a GoDaddy managed hosting would be something like what you're talking about, and then have a security site to go in it?
I'm not a big fan of the company that you just mentioned.
Right. Yeah. Neither am I.
All of them, and I don't want to say anything about any particular company, but all of the companies have shared hosting, but they also have steps above shared hosting. So I would research what makes the most sense for you. Make sure you're getting your own IP address, make sure you're getting your own SSL. But you can't rely on the web hosts to do this stuff for you. That was my mistake 6 years ago, was I was like, oh, I'm with a good web host. I'm sure everything's fine. Because if you call your web host and you say, and you're on a shared server and you say, oh, I got hacked, can you take me back to a couple days ago? You're going to have to fight them on it, and then they're going to charge you for it. Which is, when you're paying for hosting, that's not intuitive. I thought naively back then that I could just give them a call and roll me back a couple of days, and that was not the case. So just make sure you understand what you're getting before you get it. Okay? Who else? Yes.
So I've kind of been working to learn more about the security because I realize it's a problem. Are you familiar with the plugin WP Server, or do you have any thoughts about it?
I don't. I don't like to talk specifically about specific plugins. Anybody got any input on this WP Server? I'm sorry. I'm not, one of the things that I do, and maybe it's to my own fault, is that I've gotten so good at hard coding this stuff in that I've gotten away from using security plugins. And, perhaps it would be incumbent upon me to get a little bit smarter about what's out there right now. But I use WordFence, and all the rest of the security precautions that I take, I hard code into my sites. Just, yeah, HT access. So, and if you use plugins, you'll notice that if you look at your HT access before, and this is assuming you're on an Apache server, because if you're on an Nginx, it's completely different. If you're on an Apache server and you've got a HT access file and you get a plugin like, Sakuri is a good one. and you make these selections based on, how much you want to lock your site down. And then you look at your HT-Access, you'll see a whole bunch of code in your HT-Access. So, I'm sorry I couldn't answer your question directly,
A
though.
quick look at that, it's just a server load monitoring, so like it's CPU values over time.
Okay.
So it's not security related at all.
Okay.
It just tells you if your CPU's higher or lower.
He says that it's a CPU, it monitors your CPU usage, so it's not really assisting from a security standpoint at all.
Not server, not WP server, CEVER.
Oh,
Okay.
It's
okay.
it's a security plugin.
I am sorry, I am not personally familiar with that one. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you're familiar about the free Let's Encrypt HTTP SSL that's available now. Is there any time you wouldn't recommend using that, or is it just as good as a paid-for SSL?
Well, SSLs are like insurance policies. You can get a rather light insurance policy, you can get a heavier insurance policy, or you can go all in. For most of my sites, I have basically the middle level, and those certificates, a free certificate is going to give you a certain amount of security insurance. When you start paying for certificates and stuff like that, it's doubling up on capabilities and stuff like that.